now recording. Brilliant.
Sorry, I was excited.
Yeah, I can tell. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Wargamers Anonymous, to a very special episode of Wargamers Anonymous. You may have noticed that this episode is out on the alternate Monday. So we don't normally release an episode this week. It is special. It is the off week, but that is because we have done a super special interview with a Black Library author. And special. Just going to keep doing that, are you? Okay, cool. We had the honour and the privilege of interviewing Nate Crowley from Black Library, the author of the two Twice Dead King books, the Necron books that we've both enjoyed reading, as well as the Ghazghkull Thraka book that came out beginning of this year, I think that was. Special. And we were going to put it in a normal episode, and it was just going to be the main topic for a normal episode, but the interview ended up going on for quite a while, so we've decided that we wanted to, rather than editing bits out, we wanted to keep it all together, and we decided to put out a special extra episode. So special. I'm going to introduce the interview, and you can go and listen to that now. We had a lot of fun recording it, and hopefully Elston will have calmed down by the time you finish listening to that and we get to the end of the episode.
It's going to be a fun one.
Enjoy, guys. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. You are joining us in the past from Future Josh and Elston. I hope they treated you well for the intro. We are here in the past. We are joined by a very special guest, who I am very excited to have on the podcast. I know Elston is as well. And I'm instantly, I should have checked this before we started recording, but I'm instantly going to mispronounce his name. We have author of not only the two Twice Dead King books, but also the more recent Ghazghkull Thraka Prophet of the Warg book, Nate Crowley.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's fine.
Honestly, you can go with either.
I was umming and ahhing between Crowley or Crawley or...
is it Crowley?
Is it...
Crowley.
Yeah, actually, all three work.
I mean, to be honest, it don't matter how I pronounce it. My accent will butcher it regardless, so...
Yeah, you know, I'm casual about vowels, man. It's all good.
Well, I've got to explain this quickly to Nate before we get started.
God.
Pickle, please say badgers.
Badgers.
Now say badges.
Badgers.
I see.
This was a thing on a stream once, and now it's just like written law that I don't know what the difference between badgers that you pin to your jacket and badgers, the black and white furry animal, is.
You just said the same word twice.
I'm glad that this is the way we start our first like super professional interview on the podcast. Thank you very much for this, Elston. Getting us back on track. Nate, how are you? Thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. I'm well. Yeah, as we've all discussed, it's quite a warm day.
It is a very warm day today.
I'm breeding Australian desert gobies in the office I'm speaking to you from. They live in water at 40 degrees centigrade, which is just, constantly evaporating into my office. So I'm super comfortable.
Yeah, it sounds like a really comfortable situation, to be honest. So,
I mean, it's psychically very pleasant, at least.
So, as you're a guest on the podcast, there are a couple of questions that we ask all our guests. As of now, we didn't do for the first two guests that we had.
I was going to say.
But I figured that we should start asking guest questions. So the first question is, what is your preferred gaming system?
In terms
of like tabletop gaming.
GW stuff?
It doesn't just have to be GW, it can be whatever.
God, I've not played much tabletop wise in a while. I do like Age of Sigmar. Yeah. I don't actually collect. I've got quite a few models, but all for all kit bashes.
Okay.
But I love the rule set. I've played a fair bit of that. I borrow a mate's army. I've not actually played the current edition of 40k, despite having vast amount of models. Hilariously, I've played a lot more of Sigmar. Yeah, I like Gaslands. That's fun.
Gaslands is fun.
obviously.
I've heard a lot of good things about Gaslands.
Especially if you like converting and kit bashing.
Yeah, the truth of it is, I am, obviously a lifelong lore nut. I do a lot of modelling as well. Painting I'll do when I have to, and I sort of forget the tabletop game exists, other than obviously knowing roughly what's going on with stat lines and rules, because it kind of matters when you're writing tie-in fiction. But it's I think it's just because, especially with 2 years of A, a pandemic, and B, just like being a dad living in miles away from a load of friends, I just haven't had that many opportunities to take an army out.
Welcome to adult life, where trying to arrange people to get together in the same room is a real dedication, and more than like 2 people in the same room. Like going for 4, that takes some real kind of like organizational master plan to get that to work.
Yeah,
my horrible secret in general with tabletop is that basically I've got massive ADHD and I get bored waiting for the turns to happen, and I don't care if I win or lose. Really, I really enjoy, just like emergent chaos, basically. And so when other people are double checking everything and looking through rules to squeeze every last advantage out of the system, I'm just there with my army of grots, just laughing death in the face. It just doesn't matter. So I tend to just get really impatient. And, I'm not rude, but in my head I'm just like, it doesn't matter. Let's just see some things explode.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, I feel like the second question probably doesn't really need to be asked, but just for the sake of asking, and for those at home that may not know, what is your preferred army?
Skaven. It's orcs. Yeah. But I do also have, obviously, I've got a good deal of Necrons. If I'm honest, mostly unassembled. I love the models. I'm deeply in love with the Necrons as a faction. You can't do that much in the way of conversions with them.
No, they are a little bit. Orcs are easy because you can literally just chuck any old stuff together, and it go. Oh, it's definitely orc.
If you believe it, it will happen.
What I'm building at the moment for them, actually. You can't see it's on one of the high shelves. I bought a vintage model kit. Do you know what the Bagger 288 is?
No.
It's the world's largest vehicle.
Okay.
You might have seen pictures of it. It's in a coal mine in Germany, and it's essentially a giant rotary blade the size of a building.
Right.
On a 200-meter long Leviathan, which moves along on 14 sets of tracks.
Wow.
I think I've seen that. Yeah. Have they used it in like movies for like weird things? I'm sure I've seen some horrible monstrosity. And I'm like, surely that's just like a...
Basically, imagine if God was made of girders. And there's a model kit of it, which is about as big as an Alsatian.
Wow.
Wow.
And I've bought one, and I'm making a gigantic sort of moving refinery out of it. My thing with my orc, it's not an orc army. Like, I don't think there's one playable unit in it.
Sounds like the best army.
Yeah, it's entirely a sort of display project, really. But my thing is, I'm making sort of every vehicle has a function that you might not expect of an orc vehicle. So I've got like bridge layers and like sewage carriers and mushroom farms and breweries, and all the stuff that, an orc were on the move would need access to, but, it wouldn't be much fun as a, playable unit. So that's my thing.
That's cool.
Interestingly, I recently went to Tank Fest down in Bovington, which is basically, they just roll tanks out all day. And they had the bridge layer. And I'm all kinds of excited to see
Is that
what
the
an
old
orc...
Churchill?
No, they've mounted it on a Challenger 2 now.
Sick.
Yeah. Well, this is the modern day bridge layer, which is...
Oh, right. So, yeah, because I only know the old school. Because, funnily enough, because I've just been cannibalizing the parts of it today. It's a lot of fun. I go on eBay and I just buy like 80s Airfix kits that have been found half built in people's lofts, and they're selling for like £5. Doesn't matter what it is, I can use the bits. So.
Always good for Orc conversions. Orc player, Age of Sigmar preferred system. So the third and final question, and I apologise to Elston in advance. Nate, you obviously are in the UK. Have you ever indulged in a snack called a...
No, don't do it.
Have you ever indulged in a snack called a pepperami?
Yes.
Okay.
Don't
now,
do it.
you know the sheath that the pepperami comes in?
Yes, I do. Okay. Yes.
Have you ever, after you finished eating your pepperami, decided you needed a little bit of extra flavour and sucked the pepperami sheath?
No, I've not, but I respect anyone who had.
There you go. That's fine.
That's practical. It's good use of resources.
Exactly. Elston, suck it. Literally.
No, you suck it.
Right.
Oh, no.
Believe it or not, that was all the intro to the interview. That is a 10-minute intro. Obviously, we have asked you to come on to mainly chat to us about the books that we mentioned earlier on, the Gaz book, the two Twice Dead King books, but also just to ask a bit about yourself and how you got into the hobby, how you sort of started writing for Black Library. So we're going to go through, we'll ask you some questions back and forth. It's very, very casual, very, very... off the cuff. No, not. We're not prime time 10 o'clock TV in front of a live audience. We are two guys sat in our respective hobby rooms,
sweaty chairs.
Yeah. So, Elston, I'll let you go first because I've talked quite a lot so far.
Okie dokie. So let's start off with some generic questions to start off with. Let's go with, how did you get into the hobby? Like, was it like child sort of? Because mine was like a kid, and then I left it to become growing into adult, and then I came back to being a kid again. Was yours a similar kind of journey?
Yeah, sort of, actually. I first encountered the Warhammer 40,000 IP in... it was about 8:15 in the morning in February in, I think, 1996.
That's impressive.
No, I tell a lie. It might have been... No, it was February 1996, yeah. And there was a fella in my... So I was born in 84, so I would have been... Oh, that's them numbers, isn't it? Just turned 12. Yeah. Yep. And so I was in year 7 at school still, like first year of secondary school. And one of the cool kids had a copy of White Dwarf.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah. But he was one of those sort of like cool, like a French nihilist.
Oh, right,
rather than, like he was just sort of like a bit of a badass and weird. And I think his dad had some sort of hardcore job. I don't know. He had a mystique about him. But I was sitting in the desk behind at the desk behind him. And I was like, what the hell is he reading? And I remember the thing I cited first was an advert, or maybe it was an heavy metal showcase, but it was they were just relaunched Epic at the time.
Oh, okay.
No. This was prior to the relaunch. I think, yeah, this is when it was still Space Marine. Anyway, this is very boring granddad. There was a picture of this sort of drill thing with tracks. Like the termite. I don't know. I think it might be an AdMech thing or even a squat thing then.
Maybe a squat thing.
But I was like, what is that? And then he turned the page, and there was an Imperator Titan.
Yeah.
And yeah, that hit. And then that weekend, because I talked to him about it on Games Workshop, weird. And then my mate Luke said, "Oh yeah, I play that. It's really good. Do you want to go to Games Workshop with me at the weekend?" And so he took me to the Games Workshop in, I want to say Beckenham. Maybe Bexley, maybe Bromley. And I saw the box set for Titan Legions.
Yeah.
And that's my favourite cover art ever, because it's got the Imperator Titan again, squaring up against the Orc Mega Gargant. Yep. And I spent about half my intro letter to the Gaskell Special Edition just talking about how much I love that picture. Because the Mega Gargant, it manages to take this huge bloke made of metal with a castle on his back and make that look reasonable in comparison to this gigantic sort of fat robot with a big mouth, suns and moons and flames painted on it. It was like, I'd grown up on Star Wars and Star Trek, and this was a completely different kind of sci-fi. And so I was ragingly into it throughout my teens. Fell off when I went to uni, got back into it again sometime after I graduated in the mid-2000s. But I didn't stay in it for long. And then, funnily enough, I came back into it a year or so before I started writing for Black Library. So on and off, I've been into it for 26 years, and more on than off.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's a common. Cool. I think that's a common sort of story. Most people, they're into it when they're younger, then they drop off when they're, being cool and all that sort of stuff, and then they come back to it when they realise that being a grown up is actually pretty boring.
I'm locked in for life now. I'm like, it's all good. I'll be doing this till I'm ancient.
I don't have a choice. It's my job now, so.
I mean, I'm kind of. I've got a mental image in my head about like Star Wars and Star Trek and everything, and watching that, and then seeing that art, and just thinking, God, that is so metal, and just. Like, that's all it is. You're like, that's metal as anything. I want that. And yeah.
Yeah, well, like, Warhammer hit me about the same time as puberty. And they're very similar things,
I got hit with the hammer of puberty.
Yeah, so, it was just this more sort of, there's something very unfiltered.
Yes.
Even though, it's a very carefully managed thing now, obviously. Right. But it started off with this absolutely sort of wild, untamed, maximalist design philosophy that has definitely, even if it's a more consistent IP, that sort of sense of let us go big and go home has really stayed with it. I've always been in love with that.
That's cool.
Basically, whatever John Blanche spits out of his head, he'd be like, well, we're going to run with this now. Yeah. And
anything worth saying in Warhammer 40k is worth shouting.
Yeah. That feels like it should be like on a motivational poster or something. So in regards to obviously the work you've done with Black Library then, we'll get on to like some specifics about the books in a bit. I'm very interested in what's the sort of process? Like, did they approach you? Because obviously I know you've written some other stuff outside of Black Library. So did they approach you? Did you approach them as a fan? Did you have ideas in mind for like what races you wanted to write about? What the stories were? Like, how did that come about?
Literally all of the things you've just said somehow at the same time. I was at a convention doing a reading from something, and in when we was just sort of like mooching around, networking, I suppose, afterwards, I ran into one of the editorial staff at Black Library, and we were chatting for about 10 minutes before I actually asked who they were and what they did. And I said, I would love to write something for you. And they had, funnily enough, read a book of mine, Death and Life of Schneider-Rack, which is basically It's actually got a lot in common with Twice Dead King thematically. And yeah, it's a big, weird, baroque, gory science fiction. And like I say, they'd read that and said, well, you know what? Yeah, let's go for it. Do you want to try a short story? Do you want to come up with a pitch? And so I pitched them The Enemy of My Enemy, which is my first short. And that was genuinely a question that had been running around in my head and which I've heard discussed in shops and at gaming tables over and over and over again and on Reddit and whatever, which is, would there ever be a situation in which orcs would ally with forces of the Imperium of Man? What circumstances would make that happen and how would it play out? And I thought that was a brilliant place to investigate what goes on in the minds of orcs and what they're actually like. And, just dig a little bit under some of the memes and sort of try and model them as, psychologically consistent sort of functional things. I loved writing that, and I'm very grateful that they liked it too. And that was that, really. So yeah, it was very funny because in that conversation, I sort of fanboyed at them, and then was very, very lucky that they'd read something of mine. So yeah.
Nice. I mean, when you hear stories like that, you kind of go, because you're basically the same age as me. You were born in the same year, and I'm like, oh, I could have been an author if I'd tried. Instead, I'm just a painting maniac. So.
Well, you know how I became an author? That was entirely by accident as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In 2015, it was actually a really rough patch in my life. I was really, really fed up. I was really depressed. And I was this sort of project I did every day. A good mate of mine had done a tweet complaining that not enough people had wished him a happy birthday. So I started doing this running joke at him on Twitter where every day I would wish him a more elaborate happy birthday. And it was this real spark of joy in my life. And it just sort of escalated until I was writing these sort of massive threads every day set in this sort of knackered far future Earth, which had been completely depleted by the celebration of this man's birthday constantly. And it had this massive narrative to it, and it got quite popular for a while. I don't know what counts as going viral, but it was very well known. There was quite a few celebrities following it and stuff. And Rebellion Publishing, who are the publishing arm. Do you know Rebellion, the game studio?
Yeah.
So that the combined business, their game studio and a publishing arm. And they DM'd me and said, this is really good, actually. Do you want to write a book? So
nice.
I just jumped for it. And looking back on that now, so I'm doing this full time now. And I used to be a financial journalist. I loathed it. It was awful. Really, really miserable. And, I did wonder at the time why I was devoting an hour a day to writing fan fiction about my friend's birthday. But, you never know when you're going to get your escape route, I guess.
Do you know what? That is the best origin story. Marvel, fuck off. That is amazing.
If you Google Daniel Barker's birthday, I think it's still archived. I
am going to have to look this up after we finish recording, because that is a ridiculous origin story.
That is incredible. I think Brian from Templar's Crusade. I might be wrong on this, so please, people don't hunt me down. But Brian from Templar's Crusade, an old YouTuber who was into wargaming, went to work for Rebellion. I'm not sure on that. Ooh. I think he did.
But I love that it's basically, how did you become an author? I wish my friend happy birthday. Is the simple answer. That is mad.
Because I'd wanted to write when I was a kid, but I wanted to do it all through my life, really. But I never would have had the confidence to submit something to a publisher because I don't enter competitions. I don't compete in life because I just essentially already assume I've lost before I've started to play. You know, I'm just not competitive. I'm just like, I'm just happy to be defeated. So I never would have tried. And so I'm really, because now I throw my whole self into it and I love it. But yeah.
I think we should have a game at some point where there's actually no rules. We just make it up.
No, that's what you do as
life, baby.
That's what you do as a kid. You have all your mod. That's what I first started in the hobby. Like, not properly, but using stuff that my friend's mum had bought, like off car boots and stuff. And we didn't have a rule book. We didn't have terrain. We had no idea what the different units were. And it was literally, we'd just move stuff around and be like, oh, my guy's going to shoot that guy and he's dead now because he shot him. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's like playing make believe, isn't it?
Me and my mate, funnily enough, the year before I discovered Warhammer, sort of had this bizarro tabletop game using micro machines, and it vaguely had rules that involved flicking bits of scrunched up tissue paper around as like artillery shells.
Nice.
And if you hit a vehicle, you hit a vehicle.
That's it. Job done.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I think
so. In regards to, I know Gazgul is the more recent one, and it's the one that we've both read more recently, and it's Orcs, so I guess that's a special place for you. But I just really, really want to talk about the Twice Dead King books, because I
do too.
I have been playing Necrons since Necrons were a thing. Like I have played Necrons. I've played Necrons when there were like 3 different models for Necrons.
Oh, so you're OG Necrons.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, if you say Necrons, Pickle's one step away from an erection.
It's not even. I'm like half a step away. I go from
from
6 to midnight. It's I absolutely love Necrons. I've played them. I started playing 40k. It was 3rd or 4th edition. I played Space Marines for about 6 months, and then I started playing Necrons. It was their first codex. I've got a load of the old Chaos Androids and the old Necrons that are going to be going into my army.
Chaos Androids. Kudos.
So I have been a massive fan of Necrons pretty much my entire career in 40k, and I have to just say, like, wow. Just well done, because I have read every bit of lore for Necrons. I have read all the books that, like, the very few books that they have appeared in, and usually they're just this mysterious enemy in the background, and like they've over the years they have had more and more lore added to the codexes. They've been fleshed out more and more, but the 2 Twice Dead King books, Ruin and Reign, have added so much character and so much sort of backstory and interest in the Necrons as a race, like both before and after biotransference, and I just loved them.
Thank you so much. That's so kind. It's been lovely, actually, because I had the amazing fortune that Rob Rath released Infinite and Divine just before Twice Dead King, which got a load of people super excited. It's an amazing book. But I'm good pals with Rob, so I was really stoked to see that take off the way it did. And it was such a gift because it meant I could sort of come in, like the sneaky man charging into a fight and hitting someone who's already been stabbed. And yeah, it's, with the 3 books really coming out in a relatively short space of time, there's been, and also with obviously the Necrons featuring in Indomitus, there's been this big sort of Necron lore revival, and it's just such a privilege to be involved with that, and I'm so glad that the books landed well for you.
It's like even stuff like obviously in the second one, anyone that's not read it, vague spoilers inbound, so I mean, if you're listening to this, then you should be expecting them. But even the second one, like the like all the like looking more into like flayed ones and stuff, and like because like even up to the current edition flayed ones, it's just they've just got this virus, that's it. Like job done. Like there's no. I don't know. There's just so much in these, and I know that that's kind of the point of books. It expands on it, because if it was just this happened and this happened and that's it at the end, then it'd be very boring. So I know that that's kind of the point of books. But like, yeah, these three books, the two Twisted King books, the Gazgul book, and Infinite and Divine, are possibly my favorite like Black Library books that I have ever read. Like, and I'm not just saying that because you're on. Like, I've read, and I've not read loads of Black Library books. I've read a lot of the Horus Heresy stuff. I've read some other random bits and pieces, but it's been like I'm very busy. I don't have time to read as much as I used to, and I prefer reading a book rather than listening to an audiobook. Like, nothing against audiobooks. I just like sitting down with a book, and I've read all 4 of these books this year.
Good going, man.
Yeah. Not to brag, but I've read 4 books in 7 months. So.
Honestly, I've listened to a lot of audiobooks. I wonder if I've read 4 books.
Yeah,
my reading dropped off horribly.
Audible is a big problem for actual reading, because it's just like, I can have someone read to me.
I do like audiobooks. My issue is that I'm usually, if I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm doing something else at the same time, and then I'm not paying as much attention to the audiobook. Whereas if I'm sat reading, then I am just sat reading, and I find I take it in better.
Yeah.
Sorry. So all I've done there is basically just tell you how amazing you are. There was going to be a question attached to that. So
oh, damn.
This is what I do. When I start a question, there's usually like 10 minutes of just praise or preamble, and then the question hits. So the actual question was, in regards to the 2 Twisted King books, like, did you... Like, how did that come about? Did you, like, have you been a Necron fan for a while, or have you just sort of discovered them with, or like got into them with like the release of Indomitus?
Do you know about Severed?
No.
I've got good news for you, my friend. So after I'd done my short stories, The Enemy of My Enemy and Emperor, which is my one about like a Bronze Age feral world being tricked into like mass producing repair parts for a Lunar class cruiser, which was fun. I did.
That's cool.
It's a really weird story. I love it. So I was chatting with the editors at BL, and they were doing their, I think, second novella series, and they said to me, how do you feel about doing something on Necrons? And I was honest, and I said, I'd never really given that much thought to Necrons, because to me, they had always been, they are the sort of faceless, mindless, soulless antagonist. Yeah. They're spooky, but there ain't much to them. And, I sort of knew what had happened with the lore, but I wasn't that up on it. And so I had a chat with them, and they basically sold Necrons to me really well. They said, just think about how tragic they are. And my approach to writing any science fiction, especially the more far-fetched the setting or the context and the situation is, the more rewarding it is to think about the practical difficulties you would encounter immediately were you present. So I thought, okay, so let's go to first principles. What would it be like to be a Necron? And I thought for about 5 minutes and then said, yes, I will definitely write you a Necron. It was weird. I've never gone from completely disinterested to like passionately into something so quickly. I fall for things hard when I get interested in them. So Severed was a book about Xandrak and Oberon. And honestly, in some ways, it's my favourite thing I've written. I would very much recommend you get a copy. I think you'd enjoy it.
Pickle's writing it down as we speak. The audience, you see, Pickle's actually like looking around for a pen and paper.
You underestimate me. I'm on Amazon already.
And it was quite sweet, actually, because that was how I got to know Rob, because he was starting with Infinite and Divine around the same time that I was doing Severed. So a lot of the conventions that we've both used, because what I really like is that me and Rob actually have quite very different approaches to Necrons in some regards. Yeah. And I think that's as it should be. It's kind of as, I don't remember if it was before the show or after we'd started, but we were talking about how it's okay for things within the broader aegis of 40k, to contradict or not align perfectly, because it's such a huge setting. And I think especially with the Necrons, things vary from one dynasty to another. So me and Rob have got lots of different approaches, but we did agree or sort of come up with by consensus a common lexicon of stuff.
Yeah.
Like oculars for eyes, which I started with Severed, and then he really fleshed out with Infinite and Divine. And while he was doing that, by the time he was published, I was well underway with Twice Dead Kings. So I was like, okay, how have we refined the formula? I ended up writing myself a document called Necrons, a User's Manual, where I just set out all the terminology with stuff like discharge nodes and flux and all of that business. And it was great. We corresponded a lot, and obviously we're always working under what's there in the codices, but there were a lot of just useful conventions we needed to come up with if we were to do Necron POV.
Yeah.
And that made me fall even harder for Necrons, because it was just got me empathizing with them all the time.
Well, that's really cool, because between your two books and the Infinite and Divine, I think. And obviously Severed, which I've just bought. I think that they are, if I'm right, they are the only point of view Necron books, or the only ones I can remember.
I think there's some stuff in, is it World Engine? Maybe a bit in Deposition of Baal? There's a bit there's some POV in Indomitus. There's some,
I've not read Indomitus. I keep meaning to pick that one up.
And then there was a collection, I think, called the Ever Living Legion of short stories, which had a couple of, but
not to the same level though, surely.
Yeah, I don't want to get into bigging myself and Rob up too much. I think we're sort of we joke about us being the world's smallest and most specific literary clique. Just two mild-mannered dads who write about incredibly angsty immortal robots.
That's kind of what I love about it so far. And both Twice Dead King and Infinite and Divine do two elements, and it's both there's two elements of humor. And Infinite and Divine is like a car wreck of a show of just constantly two old men fighting and stealing off each other.
Do you know what Infinite and Divine is like? Infinite and Divine is like me and Luke if we were undying robots.
Right. For everyone that doesn't know Pickle and Luke in real life, I'll give it another analogy. It's like the two old Muppet guys at the top of the banister.
Waldorf and Statler.
Waldorf, yeah.
Yeah, they're just constantly arguing. But the flip side of it, in Twice Dead King, is I love the little weird things Ultics. Oh,
yeah,
brain.
Yeah.
Is that the word?
Yeah.
So when he's got his subminds and they're all sort of contradicting each other and stuff, and I was like, this is wonderful entertainment. This is a guy trying to do something and then five voices in his head to do something else. Like when the grot is bleeding on the thing and
he's just disgusted.
It's like, oh, he's bleeding.
Well, I always think there's one of my most fundamental beliefs about art, I suppose, is that horror and humor are inextricably linked.
Yeah.
I personally believe that humor is a neurological, phenomenon that has been evolved in humans as a response to dealing with consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Because, having knowledge of your own death is quite heavy. And you kind of, you need a way to deal with that. And I think humor evolved as a means of dealing with, being aware of your existence in a universe that does not care about you. So I think the two things are linked, a lot. And I think humor is often how horror is overcome. So if you have horror without humor, it's somehow, I think, less penetrative.
Yeah.
Like, this is why a lot of horror films and stuff leave me cold. When it's just like, sadistic. It's just movies about people getting hurt. I can't take it seriously.
Right.
But add a little bit of humor in there, and suddenly everyone's human.
Yeah.
And it's, then it really hits you. So to get back to the stuff in Twice Dead King with the submines and stuff, the tragedy of the Necrons for me is that, they are a post-biological culture, but they only inform. Mm-hmm. They were not in any way psychologically prepared to abandon their bodies of flesh. And that is going to be their ruin. And that's the comedy of Necrons as well. Because, you look at your classic post-biological science fiction species, like the Borg or whatever, or various beings of pure energy, and things like that. They're always sort of perfectly at ease with their existence.
Right.
And sort of, I'll think of the ships in Ian M. Banks's culture books. They've just got these phenomenal brains that just, take to, they exist as naturally as an artificial intelligence, as a dolphin, feels at home in the water. Whereas a Necron is like a crab in an oven. It is a mind that you see RoboCop 2.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I know what.
I saw that way too young. And
yes, so did I.
Robot pulling its own head off, and there's just a screaming skull.
Yeah,
it did give me a lot of nightmares, but also made me think a lot about being a robot and that. So so with his subminds, it's like, yes, you have this phenomenal capacity. You can run, you can quad core your own consciousness.
Right.
But it's not going to play nicely with itself.
No.
Because it still thinks it's a load of sort of weird quasi-Mesopotamian, feudal courtiers.
The thing I like about the Twice Dead King thing is if you look at it in an abstract, if you zoom right out of the entire thing, at the end of Reign, you're just like, it's a big joke. It's one big joke because he's gone through all of that. And you're like, yep.
Did you like the twist?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I felt so clever when I was reading that.
Like, I knew that.
Because I was going and I was like, there's going to be a twist here. I bet he's flayed. So, and then spoilers, everybody. But then when you get to the end, I loved it. I thought it was such, because like when it first happens, I love like the how blunt it is when it happens as well. Because it's the bit where he's like killed is it a dreadnought or something? He's just murdered.
He's carved it open. Yeah. The pilot's been exposed.
Yeah, and he goes to bite him, and he just goes, and he bit him back. And I was like, oh! I love that. Like, it's just, because like normally stuff like that, it's like drawn out over like, a lengthy few paragraphs or whatever. And that was just, and he bit him back.
Do you know what? You've really vindicated me there, because I drafted TDK a lot, and there were about 3 different iterations of that scene, and they were all way more drawn out. And in the end, I thought, you know what? This is the damn burst.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's do it in a sense.
That's exactly it. Because if you, especially when you go back and read it again, but even reading it for the first time, like even going back to Ruin, like you can see bits of like when he is like weirdly transfixed by the flayed one, like early on before he leaves. What the planet called?
Said
Yeah.
That said,
and like stuff, little bits like that, but then especially through Ruin, like all the way through, there's all these little hints. So like you've already got all the build up.
Notice the book starts off with him looking at like a dying animal and staring at its blood.
Yeah, exactly.
It's on page 1. Yeah.
So it's like you get all this build up and all this setup all the way through anyway. So I think the actual final twist and reveal is far more impactful and not shocking is probably too strong a word, but it hits you because it is so blunt and so brief. So yes, I think you made the right decision.
Yeah, I was just happy the Razor came back. And I was like,
my boy,
yes.
yeah.
But then, and then when it does happen, and like he's doing, you feel sad for him. You feel, oh no, like you've followed him all the way through, and then he's succumbing to the curse like everyone else. But then like it manages to then somehow make you like glad that it has happened, and like because everything's suddenly going right for him, and he's doing a really good job now because he's just like he's going with it. And I think it's awesome. And do you know what? It has made me want to kit bash a flayed Overlord so much.
Yeah, man. Do you know someone on Reddit recently did flayed Altix?
Oh, nice.
It's sick. It's really good. Actually, I like it.
That's cool.
You know, I think it's some of the Sylvaneth stuff in Sigmar is pretty good for flayed one kit bashes.
Yeah.
Because they got gribbly claws and that.
I have built and painted 5 flayed ones, and I've got another 15 to do. But
yeah, the Dryad claws, that's the ones. They've got like silly long fingers.
Yeah.
They're like they're all points.
They'll be perfect.
Right.
You know, it's funny. I bought all the miniatures necessary to make a diorama of the fight on the bridge of the Acrops. When the Death Company of the oh my goodness, Blood Angels Successor Chapter, Angels and Carmen. Sorry.
Oh right, yeah.
So I bought all the models necessary to make that, and they're still sitting in their boxes because I just started this big ridiculous Goblin Cars project.
You are a proper hobbyist. you buy stuff and leave it on your shelf.
Well, it's just, that felt too much like a sensible hobbying. Whereas, I could be like making an oil tanker out of Rio tropical cans.
I mean, yeah, definitely. So I mean, that we've gushed quite a lot about the Necron books now. Now, me and Elston haven't actually had chance. Like we do like a story time, like a book club type thing on the podcast where we'll talk about different books we've read. And I was super into getting through Gazgul. I actually read the Gazgul book in like less than a week. I had a trip down to London and I read for like 2.5 hours on the train there, 2.5 hours on the train back, and I read like 2/3 of the book. It's when a book gets you and you just, I want to read more. Like I was staying up until stupid o'clock in the morning because I was just like, one more chapter, just one more. But we've not.
What a lovely thing to
We've
hear.
not actually had chance to talk about it yet.
No, we've reserved it.
Yeah, we reserved it. So, Gazgul Thraka.
I love this.
Do you know what? I didn't know what to expect going into it. Obviously, I knew it was going to be about Gazgul because that's kind of obvious. But past that, I didn't know what to expect. And the way that you've got it set, so for anyone that's not read it, it is Order Xenos ship with an Inquisitor and a Space Wolf and
an Ogryn Psycho Lady. That's really interesting. I was like, breaking the barrier.
And they are
Psychic Awakening, baby.
Right.
And they are interrogating a grot that is supposed to be Makari, or that is Makari, but they're a bit suspicious. And it's
has been sold to them as Makari by some Blood X mercenaries.
Sold for 5 planets. And the book is then, it's like split like different chapters going between the present time interrogation and then flitting back to Makari telling like the history of Ghazghkull, and the way that it flips between the two is really, really interesting. It reminded me a lot, and I know it's not like story wise, I know it's not the same, but like how it's presented and set up reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones, like how each chapter is from a different person's perspective, and it that because of that it keeps you. Like, even not that the story would need to anyway, but it keeps you more interested because it's constantly changing. It's constantly something different. So there's never any of that like downtime where there's whatever they're going to do next is going to probably be a bit boring, and I can't wait to get through this bit. Like, because you're skipping to someone else, like you're only seeing the interesting bits. And I thought that was a really, really cool way of setting that up.
Thank you. Yeah, that was due to there were a lot of reasons for that. First of all, because I think there was a lot of fun to be had in writing in Makari's voice, but I think it would have worn on the reader if it had been a whole book of it. Mm-hmm. And I think, as well, like parts of Ghazghkull's story have been done to death. Like everyone knows Armageddon from about 9 different perspectives, and there's Chains of Golgotha, which is fantastic. Mm-hmm. From a Yarrick point of view and stuff. So there were whole bits of the story that I felt I could do, but I wouldn't necessarily. There were other areas where I could add a lot more. So exactly as you said, I could sort of, avoid hundreds of pages of Brienne of Tarth wandering around a forest, and just cut to the grisly disembowelings. It's funny actually. My wife Ashley loved Ghazghkull. She's not into 40k at all. She really enjoyed that book, and when she finished it, she said, as I understand it, this book is about like the most violent entity in probably the most violent sci-fi setting. And there's like 2 fights in it.
Yeah, right?
I thought, oh yeah. So that was weird.
It's incredible to just slightly diverge. Black Library must have seen how beautiful this book is, because they brought in a whole cast for the audiobook.
I love the audiobook.
So usually audiobooks are read by one person. This one is multiple people, and Makari like flips between like voices and stuff like that. It's just beautiful the way they've done it. And I was like,
Paul Putner's the guy doing the Makari chapters.
Okay.
And it's lovely because he's a comedian and he's a Londoner. And in my head, Makari was based on, I said this on the Adeptus Ridiculous podcast, actually. He was based on like this specific type of London pub man who's like just sits in a corner looking like he wants to murder his friends. And, it's that voice, right? Which is ostensibly quite friendly, but you're going to die. And, like Paul just did that for Makari. It's actually kind of different from, the sort of the meme orc voice.
Yeah,
but it was ideal. I listened to that audiobook and was so grateful to the man because it was just like he was reading my internal monologue.
Yeah.
Oddly enough, before I listened to that, I listened to Mortimer and Whitehouse going fishing.
Yes.
And it sounds like Paul Whitehouse. And I was like, it's kind of like Paul Whitehouse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like, that's on point. I like that.
No, it was great. It was wonderful getting to really... Because obviously it's a book about Ghazghkull, but as Makari says, to know Ghazghkull, you have to know Makari.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was what a wonderful character to get to play with.
I think... Because I obviously, as I mentioned to you earlier on, in preparation for today, I did re-listen to that episode of Adeptus Ridiculous. And I remember them saying stuff about not expecting it to be expecting it to be more Ghazghkull POV rather than Makari and all that sort of stuff. I personally think that having it done from Makari's point of view, looking at Ghazghkull and it being like a second-hand retelling from him, and because of how Makari exists, he is the same person, but also isn't the same physical being.
Because they believe in Makari appears.
But I think that having it told from that perspective makes far more sense, because it's that sort of like legend of Ghazghkull, and I think like the legend and the belief in the legend is far more important than the actual deeds. Because like a lot of the orc stuff, like it, like the headbutt with the portal and stuff, like all the orcs believe that he headbutted it and it closed. It probably just happened to close at that time. But
it doesn't matter.
But that's it. The legend is more important, and I think that having it told, because it's Makari, spreading the legend and telling the tale, I think that is a more, and it also leaves it open for like, other people writing books and stuff in the future. It's then not as sort of like, oh well, so and so has said this, and it's
they can contradict every word, and I would be delighted.
Yeah, and
I would be honoured.
So
see. I'm going to take the opposite view, and I believe it all happened because the orcs believed it happened, and that's what I believe this book is. They believed it happened, and the book just makes it happen. It's the entire epitome of the book is the concept of orcs believe this, so it happens, and the book keeps on doing it
on both the human and the orc sort of perspectives. It's a book about objectivity and about, I suppose, consensus emerging between like mutually exclusive conflicting ideas. If that doesn't sound too highfalutin, like there's a lot about equal and opposite forces in the book, whether it's Grotznik and Makari, or like Falx and Baeta, or even like Hendrickson and Falx. There's a lot of things that match up. Even if you notice, the chapter titles are palindromic. So like the first 6 chapter names are then repeated in reverse order. So it ends with Ghazghkull is born.
I didn't actually notice that, but I'm now going to go back and listen to it.
If you look, I overthought the whole thing stupidly. Like this, the Greek term is chiasmus, where you have opposing concepts that eventually merge and end up on the opposite sides or positions from where they started. Okay. It's a really interesting literary device. I thought it was interesting because it's about a culture clash. It's about humans and orcs basically, headbutting with their psychologies, and it's about whether two things can be true at the same time. And, like when Baeta says, what about your emperor? Is he alive or dead? And that's... it's interesting because there's kind of a bit of that going on for the Imperium as well. So and obviously the whole idea about like orc psychic gestalt and stuff.
I like the bit where Makari's explaining about Ghazghkull's in a slump, and they're like, so Ghazghkull was depressed, and he's like, yes, I think so. And it's like, an orc's depressed?
It's such I like that bit
interesting concept.
Where they say like he's depressed, and then he has to explain the concept of depression, and then he's like, I guess that is what it was, because
Ghazghkull's got a raw deal, because whether it's a result of his brain injury or whether he's chosen by the gods, he's becoming something more than all the other orcs. And that's good. It makes him very good at winning wars. One of the reasons he's very good at winning wars is because he can plan around the possibility of defeat. He can imagine being defeated. And, it's like I was saying earlier about like humor as a coping mechanism to like existential horror. It's like most orcs are just constantly in Disneyland. They are just in a world that they are made perfectly for. We are made for war. There is nothing but war. This is Valhalla. But for Ghazghkull, he's like, oh, I'm aware of other things.
Yeah,
kind of takes the fun out of war.
I mean, you never really hear of an orc having a headache before. It's like, apart from maybe when their skull's been like ripped in half or something like that. But Gazgul. But yeah, I mean, it took me a little while to get into the concept of it, but as you get about halfway through the book, you start realizing you're like, so Gazgul wasn't Gazgul until Gazgul was Gazgul, and Makari wasn't Makari until Makari became Makari.
Yeah,
and it was like,
of it.
yeah, and it's like anyone listening to that sounds bonkers, but I'm like, that's the logic we're using here, and you just have to run with it because it'll keep on happening. It's incredible. I love it.
Yeah, it's so. It's been lovely actually with that and Twice Dead Kings. I did a lot of research into ancient Egyptian and Mesopotamian sort of religious and philosophical systems, and like it's an alien world. Like if you get really into the way the Egyptians and the Mesopotamians thought, there's more commonality with the Greco-Roman world. But if you go back to those older civilizations, and then again, I don't know as much about it, but the Mesoamerican civilizations, like the Maya, it's just a psychologically alien world. There are just concepts we don't have. They're functionally identical human beings to us, but they have just an entirely different way of viewing things like time and truth and, what it is to be alive and things like that. And yeah, obviously there's a lot of that in Twice Dead King, but it kind of kept leaking into Gazgul as well. Because the orcs just, again, I tried to make them internally consistent, but they got some, it's a strange way of thinking.
Yeah, like the bit where Gazgul, you see, what's the planet where they all start getting ready on? Is it
Urk.
Where Gazgul gets naked and just stands there, and Makari's like, have you stopped breathing, boss? He's like, oh yeah.
It wasn't important to him.
Yeah. It's just that wonderful concept of the natural order of the world, what we would consider needing to happen for things to happen, just doesn't apply. I love it. I love it.
It makes it such fun to write as well because, usually you have to think of conceivable ways round things. Whereas I wrote that book like an orc.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
I would like, obviously with you, like really, really liking orcs and really, really liking Necrons. Like, how jealous are you of Infinite and Divine? Like, because that's birth.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I mean, well, I say Rob's my friend. He is technically my nemesis. We try really hard to be arch enemies. We're just not very good at it.
I think it's really cool, like you mentioned earlier, that you guys like obviously chat to each other and like consult each other with how you refer to different things within the books and stuff, just to keep them sort of consistent as like across like the different books. That is really, really cool. I've never been sure like how Black Library works. I assume basically they go, you can write here's the 10 commandments or the million commandments written on stone. This is the law. Don't worry about all the bits that contradict each other. This is it. Don't break any of this. Go.
They are so. I mean, I got a lot of time, like a lot of respect for the editorial team there because they are keeping track of so much. And they are really sharp on picking stuff up. Because we make mistakes all the time. But I still think it's important to, I like to stay in touch as often as I can with other authors, especially those who are working in, areas adjacent to the bits I'm writing about. And I think, it's quite unique writing for an IP that's so big as this, because we are all playing on the same team. We're all telling, we're all painting in little bits of a much bigger picture. So the more we can, we'd all go mad if we tried to align everything and make sure nothing ever contradicted.
Oh God, yeah.
But the more sight we can have of what each other are doing, the better, and the more fun it is as well.
Yeah.
With obviously with Gazgul and Twice Dead King, did it feel a bit more like, so for example, a Horus Heresy author would go, here's the line, he's kind of the points, fill in the gaps, essentially. But with Twice Dead King and Gazgul, it must have been like, so here's a big open canvas, because this stuff doesn't exist yet, so we'll just if you go off the page, we'll chop those off. But apart from that, have at
especially
it.
with Twice Dead King, like that was it's just all brand new.
Yeah, there was two different challenges actually with Gazgul. There's been several iterations of Gazgul's story over the years. So weirdly, it was actually quite a lot like doing historical research, because these are the facts that have been identified, and I put loads of post-its on my wall with things that are known or said or claimed about Gazgul, and I write, okay, how do I fit this all together while still basically doing my own thing? With Twice the King, as you say, it was pretty much completely free reign, because I'd gone with a new dynasty as well. I'd gone homebrew. And that was tremendous fun, because I got to invent things like the Warlock of Carnotite and, Gravitic Trebuchets and Scolopendra.
Right.
And things like that. But it was tricky as well, because there was so much linking back to pre-biotransference stuff, but that has to remain really opaque, because the studio hasn't released models of the Necrontyr. There is no established description of them, so it's not my place to charge in and say, well, they had a beak. So I had to be very circumspect about, so I was conscious that I wanted to get lots of drama and resonance and all that sort of thing in with the historical stuff, without actually stating much as fact.
Yeah.
And I think if there's one thing I try to do as a Black Library author, and which is very funny in the context of what we were saying about Gazgul a few minutes ago, it's to try and get away with stating as little as possible as fact as I possibly can.
Right. Cool.
Because, every single time you attach a number to something, a Reddit thread is born. Hey, that makes it sound like it's my problem. It's not. It lessens the experience for the reader if their disbelief is suspended or it goes against their headcanon stuff. At the end of the day, this the magic of this IP, this system, this world, is the stories people tell in their own heads when they're playing the game, or where they're just listening to some drum and bass and thinking about Warhammer Man fighting, which is one of my hobbies. But that's where the real 40k stories are. And so obviously I care deeply about trying to tell the best stories I can, but it's not about setting out the facts as, I don't want to say it's no facts, only vibes, but trying not to be too prescriptive about what is definitely the case and definitely not the case.
Yeah.
So
yeah, like we mentioned the biotransference and stuff. One of the things I liked and latched onto was the Red Baron, and they're coming collecting people and pushing them into. And I was like, oh, I didn't realize that. Well, I didn't realize, because I knew they got tricked. I didn't realize it was that scale of you're going in there, whether you want him or not. You're like,
it was a self-genocide, yeah.
Right.
And that's a lovely example, actually, because I really enjoyed coming up with that mythology. You know, and that, the Destroyers, I wish I'd got to spend a bit more time with them. There's actually a short story all about them in the special edition of Reign, which I hope comes to light somewhere else someday.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, I love those guys. And that, like I say, I really love coming up with that backstory. But, you know, it's very clear that was an Ithacus thing. So maybe it didn't happen elsewhere. But it's been lovely because I've seen guys really coming out. But I spend loads of time lurking on Reddit. Or what can I say? I really like 40k subreddit. There was a really interesting discussion on there. So someone had just painted their destroyers red because they thought that was the thing, that I really like the way this looks. And someone else was like, oh, is this a reference to the original destroyer model from 4th edition that was painted red in an heavy metal supplement? And like, to be fair, like, I'm not above being that much of a nerd, but no, it was a complete coincidence. But I love that they made the connection because that made it a bit more real for them.
That's really cool. Right. That's really, really cool.
Pickle, are you now looking for that special edition book by chance?
I looked at the special editions when it came out. Unfortunately, I am a poor man, so
I saw your head twitch towards your computer when Nate said it. I
have got everything in hardback because hardback, you know, if you're going to buy a book, do it right.
The short story with Ruin, I loved writing, actually. That was so you know the Siege of Antiketh. Where like the Imperium just basically sandblasts a Necron crown world with human soldiers.
Right.
I wrote that story from the perspective of a civilian pilgrim volunteer who is the first man to set foot on the sand of Antiketh. And he hasn't even got a working lasgun. He's just got his faith. And he is really stupid.
Just on that note, that, like, I know it's a Necron book, but I think that's probably one of the only books where I have felt like humanity and the Imperium are an actual threat. And I think it's because most of the time we see things from our point of view, and it's like Tyranid swarms like overwhelming and orcs overwhelming, and we haven't got the resources needed or the manpower and all this sort of stuff. And it's always very much like we might win, but only just, and it's like a small minority escape and stuff. Whereas in both of these, like, humanity is like a big threat. Like, them Necrons are screwed. Like,
yeah.
I've always wanted to write humanity as cosmic horror.
Right. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah. Because we'd be scary, man.
Well, it's just like,
we're horror.
There are a lot of us. But it's like, because we're always seeing it from our perspective of other stuff. And like, especially like with this being like, it's only one Necron world. It's not Necrons as a race. Like, I found it really interesting that it's sort of swapped on its head. Even given like the Necrons like clearly superior like technology and stuff, just don't have the numbers. It was cool.
It's there's a bit too much hero hammer in the world.
Yeah, a little bit. I think we're probably going to wrap up there. Elston, unless you've got any other questions.
I mean, I could carry on.
I know. I feel exactly the same.
Hours. I'm quite like, I'm enjoying myself quite a lot just having a chat about stuff. But we probably should wrap it up, because otherwise we'll delve into territories and we'll get people in trouble and stuff like that.
It's not that I've got to edit this, so it'll end up being the next 4 podcasts if we carry on for too much longer.
Right.
Yeah, I'm sorry, boys. I do not shut up.
It's fine. It's absolutely fine. Do you know what? Like I said, I could quite easily go for longer, but
I just hope it don't sound like a bell end for having talked about chiasmus and Mesopotamian schema of philosophy. Warhammer for me is about taking serious things lightly and taking silly things incredibly seriously.
I mean, to be honest, I
love
think
that
it
philosophy.
doesn't really matter what you've spoken about in the entirety of the podcast. The fact that you've just used the word bell end at the end, I think it brings you back down to earth regardless of what you've talked about. So don't worry about that
Welcome
at all.
to Wargamers Anonymous.
So, Elston, have you got any final questions or sentiments or anything?
Basically, all I'm going to say is thank you so much for coming on. It's been wonderful talking to you, Nate. I really hope we can do it again. Hopefully, some more books on the way. We're not going to delve into that, but
I'm working a lot at the moment.
yes. So
And that's as specific as we'll get.
Yeah, that's it. So, hopefully, I mean, after, it's been wonderful to chat. I would be happy doing just hobby talking to you on live stream or whatever, but I think we probably need to keep it to an edited thing just in case we slip up somewhere. So,
I'll show up sometime and give you a tour of the Goblin cars. There are 100 under construction, so
yeah. To everyone that didn't, everyone that's listening, you didn't.
Oh, yeah.
Nate showed us a brief glimpse of his hobby room, and it's incredible.
It's on par with yours.
He is a wargamer extreme like myself, and I am so honored to have an author that's an absolute hobby nerd as well to chat to. It's been wonderful.
Yeah,
so.
man, I'm a disaster.
Love it. Welcome to the chaos.
Nate, is there where can people find you online? Do you want to share any of that? Do you want to anything else you want to talk about, or anything you want to ask us before we wrap up?
I am present on Twitter as Frog Crowley, FrogCrowley. For a full rundown of what I've written, obviously 2 Twice Dead King books, Gazgul, the novella Severed, the short stories Enemy of My Enemy, Emperor, and Mad Doc. I also do some non-Warhammer stuff. My last book was a fictional travel guide called Notes from Small Planets, which is done with HarperCollins, and it was like a completely fake Lonely Planet guide to a load of satirical fantasy worlds I'd invented. That was quite fun. Did another
amazing.
sort of fictional non-fiction called The 100 Best Video Games That Never Existed. Which is, again, entirely fictional retrospective on 30 years of video gaming history that didn't happen. And then I also, there was the Death and Life of Schneider-Rack, which is a book about prisoners of war being executed and then reanimated to work on whaling ships on an alien ocean, and then organising an uprising to seize the means of production.
Wow.
So, probably the best pseudo-Marxist zombie whalecore novel ever written.
Nice.
I mean, I would laugh if that's not actually that niche a category as you think. I was looking earlier, and I have to admit, I have ordered the best 100 video games book just because.
I'm going on Audible in a minute.
I'm a big video game fan, and it seems like something that would tickle me. So that is hopefully going to be here soon. But yeah, thank you very much for that.
It is the perfect companion for a toilet. I'm not saying wipe your ass with it. I'm just saying, basically, each of the 100 entries takes exactly as long to read as it takes to do a poo. So
that's incredible.
And we're going to have to cut that word out because Nate said a naughty word. He said poo.
Very naughty.
Ellen doesn't count.
That don't count now. Well, there we go. Thank you very much for joining us. It's been, do you know what? I when I messaged you, it was like a super long shot, but I feel so honoured and so happy that you've joined us and talked to us. We're speaking to an actual famous person.
Yeah, right. It's been really fun, boys.
Thank you very much. And to everyone that is listening, we'll go back to future Josh and Elston right about now. So, I hope you enjoyed listening to that interview. We had a hell of a lot of fun recording that and chatting to Nate. Obviously, we talked to him quite a bit before we recorded and afterwards. Do you know what? It was so nice of him to put some time aside, stay up late to talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just so happy that there's a Black Library author that used the word bellend. That was the highlight for me.
that was the highlight. The interview was like over an hour long, but that one word, it means so much to both of us. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to that. I hope you will go and check out his works. We'll put all the list of the stuff that he's worked on in the show notes and in the description. If you want to go and check them out, please do. I highly recommend, especially the 2 Twice Dead King books and the Gazgul book, all absolutely superb. So go and check those out, and go and check him out on all his socials. I'll try and list them down below in the description. He did mention them on the end of the interview. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, be sure to leave a like if you're on YouTube, or subscribe to the channel if you're not already. Follow us if you're on any of the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening. Elston, where can we find you on the World Wide Web if we want to follow you?
If you want to follow me, I'll classify you as a stalker and I will take the appropriate legal action. But if you want to look at me on the internet, that's OnlyFans Elston Nation. I'm joking. You can find... Are you all right there?
I was having a sip of coffee because I thought, I can have a sip of coffee while Elston's talking. Obviously not.
Mental image. You can find me on YouTube, Elston Nation. There is a Facebook page, Elston Nation's Minis. I'm on Instagram as well. And if you want to contact me, probably best either through the Pickle Jar Discord server or Facebook, or you can drop me a comment on any of my YouTube videos. How about you, El Capitan Pical?
You can find me, as always, over on my channel, The Pickle Jar, or on my live stream channel, Pickle Vision, where I live stream most Wednesdays. I usually say every Wednesday. I'm having a bit of a reshuffle with the streams, but it is still going to be most Wednesdays. But yeah, you can find me over there, or on my main channel. You can find me on my Discord server. Link for that down below in the description. It's the best way to get in contact with me. Or obviously on any of my socials, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all those places. So there we go. Thank you very much for listening, ladies and gentlemen, and we will be back next Monday with our regular episode. We are hoping to do more of these sort of interview episodes as we grow, as we continue to expand.
So if you know famous people, let us know so we can hijack them into our show. I mean, they don't even have to be wargaming related, to be fair. I mean, if you know some kind of weird people like Benedict Cumberbatch or something like that, we could talk to him.
Yes, if anyone knows Benedict Cumberbatch, please ask him to come on our podcast. And we can talk to him about being a dragon.
Yay!
And with that, we're out of here. Thanks very much for tuning in, guys, and we will catch you on the next episode.
Bye.
Did you fall off a cliff?
I was doing sound effects.
Cool.